Day 3. My name is Trevin, and a few days ago the government put our little town on quarantine and locked out anyone coming in or going out. Now, I don't really like people anyway, so at first the idea of being told to stay at home seemed like a very welcome option to me. They said it was some new strain of the flu or some other worse version of a common disease. I'm not really all that sure because, to be honest, I wasn't really paying attention when they told us. I don't ever watch the news. I did, however, realize that I hadn't heard any rumors or anything else involving the discovery or potential threat of some new disease. This makes the quarantine feel very odd and very sudden, now that I truly think about how this all came about. What further increases how odd this seems to be is the fact that today I decided I wanted to grab an energy drink or two from the gas station on the edge of town. As I got in my truck and drove the 4 blocks to the gas station, I noticed that I was literally the only vehicle on the road. I mean, in the whole town. Once I got to the gas station, I saw military vehicles blocking off the roads out of town. Let me be a little more specific here. There were 2 Humvees with roof-mounted 50 caliber machine guns. No troops, just the vehicles. I parked at a spot as close to the gas station door as I can. This was easy in a completely vacant parking lot. I get out, try to go inside, maybe I can ask the cashier if they know more about what's going on. Now, this thought suddenly faded as I walked inside the building to complete silence, emptiness. I don't mean it was a strange void that I walked into as I opened the main door. What I mean is that, there was no music, there was no chattering, absolutely no people anywhere. Not really sure of what to do, I finally decided to grab one of the drinks I came in for. I left a $5 bill on the counter, loudly announced to apparently nobody what I was doing. Then I left back out to my truck. Once I get back to my truck, I set the drinks on the passenger seat, turned the engine over, glanced back over to the military vehicles sitting in their attempt to block the road, and that's when I noticed that just beyond the Humvees, there was a curious, dense fog blocking out my view of anything past maybe 10 feet from the vehicles. So from where I was sitting in the parking lot, I guessed that there was maybe 1/8 of a mile worth of visibility. So I decided to drive over to the roadblock. Maybe I just couldn't see the soldiers sitting in their vehicles. I could ask them if they were able to give me any information about what was going on, maybe the severity of whatever disease they had told us was going on. I'm back out of my spot. I turn off towards the roadblock. And as I get closer, I notice that the fog was not moving back the closer I got to it. It remained in place like a wall. I pulled up, I stopped, put my truck in park. Sitting only a few feet from the Humvees, I hesitated before getting out to get a closer inspection of the situation. I didn't notice any soldiers asleep in the reclined seats like I had expected to see as I got closer, and slowly I exited my truck and walked towards the 2 military trucks and towards the fog that oddly remained in place like some sort of swirling cloud wall. As I got within about an arm's reach of the fog, a little detail about it sparked my attention. The first was that it seemed to be emanating a sound, something like a static or low sizzle. Another note was that it looked like it had some strange sort of purple tint. Not really a tint, more like a glow. Just a faint sort of bioluminescence. Lastly, I decided to reach out and place my hands into the fog. As I expected, it felt no different than a cool mist enveloping my hand as it moved past the edge and into the fog. What I didn't expect was that it also had a strange sort of weight to it. Almost like the mist felt heavy. One of the purple bioluminescent swirls floated over and across my hand, not feeling any different than the rest of the fog, but visually I watched it happen and it caused me to quickly recoil my hand, thinking, okay, now I have a crazy story to tell my wife once I get back to the house. I guess that now is a good time as any to explain a little bit more about my situation as this event started, right? I live in a small, and I mean small town. The total population of our town is probably 800 people. To be honest, I feel like they included pets in that count, just to make it sound bigger. And the size is maybe 10 blocks by 12 blocks. It's one of those towns you can hold your breath and make it all the way through town as you drive through. We have 2 gas stations next to each other on the edge of town. A video game arcade, a hardware store you can't walk into because it's owned by an old hoarder. So if you need anything, you have to tell him what you need and let him search the building to find it, bring it back out to you to pay for it. Cash only, as you can expect. No grocery store or any other types of stores. We managed to end up with a McDonald's in town near the gas stations. Well, see, I live about a block away from our town circle in a 2-story house with my wife, Grace, 2 dogs, 2 young daughters, an infant we named Izzy, and a 2-year-old we named Addie. And don't worry about us with this quarantine business. We should be good to go. We got a freezer full of meat, lots of water, non-perishable foods stocked in the house. Now that you have an idea about how we entered into this whole ordeal, I'll get back to my story. I was still standing there, a mere few feet away from the fog. I looked back into our small little town and noticed that there was no fog at all. None closer to the center of town, that is. I jogged back to my truck. I get in. I backed away from the roadblock. I decided to drive the 10-ish blocks to the other side of town. And as I drive through town slowly, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a shadow flash past as I drive past an alley. Now, I stopped my truck suddenly, and I rolled the window down to peer down the alley, trying to see if it, what I may have seen. And after about a minute, seeing no further movement, I rolled my window back up and continued towards the other side of town. Still moving through the town, looking both ways down each intersecting street, I remained the only vehicle moving in the whole town. And once I get to the far side of town, I came to the same scene as I had before on the other side of the road, in and out of town. 2 Humvees, sideways, to form a roadblock. No soldiers in sight. Purplish, grayish fog just past the roadblock. It was then that I noticed that there'd been no sound. Almost completely silent, save for the sound of my truck, my breathing, sound of my own heartbeat nervously in my ears. The lack of background noise was strange enough in the gas station earlier, but as I got out of my truck at the second roadblock, I noticed that there were no sounds. No sounds of trucks or cars traveling on the nearby interstate. No birds, no dogs, lawnmowers, crickets, nothing. The lack of ambient noise anywhere in town unsettled me enough to make the decision to remain in the vehicle for the remainder of my expedition around town in search of answers. I decided to drive around the edge of town, curious about the fog, and as I drove my truck full circle around the town, I confirmed my fear. The wall of strange fog was surrounding our town, and the same military roadblock at every road out of town. I drove back home, I grabbed the drinks off my passenger seat, and went inside. As I walked in the house, my wife, who was currently playing Barbies with our toddler as our infant crawled around the room exploring different toys lying around, said, "What took you so long?" And just then, realizing that all my exploring of the situation in town had caused my short trip to the gas station for drinks to take nearly an hour, I replied, "It's weird out there. Something's very much not normal in town." I continued, adding a look on my face to tell my wife that I had a story to tell her once we didn't have little ears listening. Catching my hint, she assured our toddlers that she would be back to play with Barbies with her in just a few minutes, and followed me into the kitchen where I was able to tell her everything I saw that was going on while I had been out. She tried to pull out her phone and make calls to her family. Now, this act taught us, very interestingly, facts about our current situation. Oddly enough, we had internet, but somehow limited, as if there was some sort of strict parental control over our entire network. YouTube, Plex, Spotify, Google, they all seem to work just fine. But the phone, Facebook, text, Kik, any kind of communication app, it did nothing more than endlessly load. It wouldn't even open at all. No form of news seemed to be able to load either, so phones, tablets, computers, they'd been reduced to devices solely for entertainment. Together, we decided to do our best to stay in the house as much as we could until we understood more of what was really happening. This decision being made, she went back to play with the children, and the dogs began to trail me around the kitchen as I began to prepare us something for dinner. That night, after eating and getting the girls in bed for the night, my wife and I sat on the couch with some movie playing on the TV that neither of us were paying attention to, while we talked about the things that we had noticed when we glanced out the window during the day, and wildly speculating as to what we thought was really going on. After a while, and once the movie that we weren't even paying attention to finally ended, we decided to go to bed. Day 4. I awoke to my 2-year-old running in our bedroom screaming at 6:30 a.m. Daddy, I want Cinnamon Crunch! Who needs an alarm set when you have little kids? I thought to myself as I sat up. Apparently it's time to get up. Okay, let's get you some cereal, I said to her as I got out of bed and began to follow my daughter downstairs while she rambled on about what she wanted to do today. I want to watch a movie. I want my tablet. Come sit with me on the couch. As we got to the top of the steps on our way down to the kitchen, our littlest let out a cry announcing that she was awake now too. I told my 2-year-old that we would get to one thing at a time and that I'd meet her downstairs after I brought her little sister to my wife so she could nurse her. As I dropped off the youngest to my wife and head back out of the room to get breakfast ready for our little daughter, I hear her yell to me as I reach the top of the stairs again. Please make coffee, and strong. I'm on it, I replied as I walked down the steps. As I reach the bottom of the steps, my jaw drops as I felt fear rise in the back of my throat. I yell up to my wife to get downstairs as I see this. Soon I hear her moving upstairs, making her way with our daughter to the top of the steps and making her way down them. By the time she got to the bottom of the steps, I had moved over to the window to the far side of the room. What the fuck? She exclaimed as she hits the bottom of the stairs. Looking out the window, the fog that I had saw yesterday had crept into the town. It swirled outside the panes of glass. The violent hints of color had become more of a pearlescence, like looking into a puddle in the summer that had bits of oil or chemicals spilled into it, shimmering rainbows of color as the light reflected off of it. Our visibility out the window had been reduced to a few yards past the road. I could only make out the front door of the house across the street. I told you something weird was going on, I said to my wife. I told you it feels a little weird, kind of heavy, but I don't think it's dangerous. Beyond the swirls of the odd fog outside, I saw nothing out of the ordinary. Again, today, however, I still didn't see any cars drive down the road. No movement at all. So I walked into the kitchen and got breakfast ready and coffee started as my wife remained looking out the window, searching desperately to find any form of normalcy in the purple rainbow haze our house had been engulfed in as we slept last night. As I gathered the various parts and pieces needed to prepare cereal for my daughter, both dogs wandered in the kitchen sleepily and sat staring at me next to the door, clearly asking to be let outside to do their normal business. Cautiously, I hesitated to look out the window and the door, unsure if the dogs would be okay out in the backyard in the fog. Okay, make it quick. Shit's getting crazy outside, I said to Bodhi, as I pulled the door open and let them both run out in the backyard to relieve themselves. Now, our 2 dogs are both 70 pounds. One boy, Bodhi, a pit bull, French Mastiff mix, and one girl, May, who is some sort of black-mouth cur mix. As the dogs run out the door, Bodhi stops at the top of the porch, steps cautious to get out into the fog, but relents and quickly does his business and runs back into the door to be let back in. May, on the other hand, has no hesitation as usual and sprints out into the yard, takes her time, then finally returns. I hate to admit to using the dogs as guinea pigs to see if the fog was dangerous, but letting them outside was truly just that, a test to see if it was harmful, and thankfully it was not. Our dogs are fine. When I opened the door, I once again noticed that there was still no ambient sounds outside. So no birds chirping, no bugs. I decided that even though the fog seemed to be harmless, there was something very eerie going on. Something that made all the birds leave and everything remain quiet. Trevin, come here quick! I rushed into the room where my wife was standing, still looking out the window. Look, she said, as she pointed over across the street. I looked just in time to see a small orange glow fade off into the fog. What was that? I say as I step closer to the window next to her, trying to peer deeper into the fog to no avail. I don't know. It looked like some small animal, a raccoon maybe, but it was on fire. It was just running down the street. We both stood in awe, trying to look further into the fog to see it again, or possibly catch a better glimpse of what it was. As we stood there, peering into the purple mist, our 2-year-old happily ate her cereal, humming along to what sounded like a Moana song playing in her head. And then we heard it. The first sound I had heard coming from outside since yesterday. It was quiet at first, coming from further away and heading towards our direction and getting louder. Do you hear that? What is it? My wife whispers to me as we both lean towards the glass to hopefully hear better. As the sound grew closer, it became more apparent that it was some excruciating animalistic screaming, like the sound of a rabbit in pain, mixed with a terrified scream of pain from a young girl. And as the sound got louder and closer, it was enough to make your skin crawl. I noticed that it was constant. Like it was being made with one long breath from something with an infinite lung capacity. Just as I was about to vocalize my observation of the sound, my wife exclaimed, "Holy shit, look!" "Holy dit," I hear Addie repeat behind us as my eyes focused on what my wife is talking about. Just coming into view as it ran down our street was that small raccoon-sized animal, still on fire. Now, the animal was clearly not a raccoon, but it was about that size. It had 6 legs and moved with an almost elegance. The head was somewhat large for its body, shaped like an upside-down triangle. Protruding from its face were mangled mandibles that looked like the mouth of the creature in those Predator movies. It had a tail that looked almost lizard-like, scaly and thick. Had no fur, but it had tight, dark, almost black skin and completely engulfed in what looked like a fireball. The thing ran up into our yard towards the house, got halfway to the house, and changed direction. The fire following it the entire time, yet the animal didn't seem to even notice. As it changed direction, it stopped for a split second, looked towards our window. Our eyes met, and in that split second, our eyes were locked. My brain exploded with visions, and my chest felt weighted down as if I had been kicked in the chest by an MMA fighter. Horrific visions of blood and viscera, torture and mutilation. Terrible pictures flashed in my mind, so many and so quickly that I could never describe each one, instantly causing my head to ache and nearly causing me to collapse to the ground. As quickly as it had happened, it broke eye contact and skidded off back down the street. "What happened?" Grace said, as she saw my stance shudder with a sudden psychological attack that I had endured. "I wasn't making the noise," I said, ignoring the question my wife had just asked, not knowing how to even explain what I had just experienced. To this, she realized I was right and turned back to the window, just as another orange glow began to appear from the fog. This time, it was making the guttural screams that pierced our ears and almost hurt my heart to listen to. As it came into focus, it was a man. Tall, extremely thin. No hair, very unusual facial features. It looked like the skin was melting off his body, which was why it made so little sense, because he too was naked and completely engulfed in flames. As he ran past our house, Grace and I stood in silence, watching. The man, unlike the spider or raccoon, definitely seemed to notice the fireball he was surrounded by, and the scream-like sound never stopped as he ran past our house. It didn't stop for him to take a breath, didn't change pitch, but it was definitely coming from this man, and as we watched, it became clear he was now either chasing or hunting the other spider creature that had just run past. He, however, didn't run into our yard, but continued straight down the street in the direction of the other animal. As he began to get far enough away to fade from view and into the fog, Grace broke our stunned silence. What did just... How about we close the blinds for now? Yeah, that's a good idea, I agreed, as we both began to run around the house closing all the blinds. We spent most of that day leaving the blinds closed, pretending nothing was wrong, trying to keep the girls entertained. Only a few more times through the day did we hear the screaming, or the other unnatural noises coming from outside, and a couple of times Addie questioned it, but we were able to keep her distracted by playing Barbies with her or having dance parties in the living room. After the girls went to bed that night, we sat quietly by the window, blinds open, both staring out into the dark of the night, watching, waiting, listening. After about an hour, with nearly nothing said between us, I broke the silence. I'm almost afraid to go to bed after how much changed as we slept last night. I'm not sure I want to know what will be different when we wake up tomorrow, I admitted, as I stared into the night, the purple haze swirling just on the other side of the glass. We can make sure all the doors are locked and stay up all night looking out this window, but I'm not sure that's going to change whether or not things will change overnight, Grace replied, taking her turn to be the voice of reason. Yeah, you're right. Let's go to bed, I said, getting up to check the doors. As I approached the front door to check the lock, I heard another distant, animalistic scream emerging from the fog, almost as if to remind us that this was far from over. We moved from our main floor to the upstairs, checking on the girls, and lied down, still both awake from the better part of an hour, laying in silence, listening to anything coming from outside. Hey there kids, it's me, Mrcreepypasta, and I just want to make sure that all of you guys are still staying safe and doing your best to stay inside and keep yourself quarantined if you can do so. For those of you who can't, really appreciate you guys doing what you have to do. So, all the best to all of you who are still working, and all the best to all of you who are forced to kind of stay home and are not able to work. If you guys are missing out on a lot of the conventions, which at this point, all of them that I was planning on going to this year with the exception of San Japan, looks like have been either canceled or pushed back. If you guys were looking forward to any of the conventions this year and are missing out on a lot of the artwork from some of your favorite authors or artists, take a look in the description down below. At least until the quarantine is over, you'll be able to find links to a bunch of my artist friends as well as authors in the description of every video. And of course, I will be bringing you guys stories every single day from now until the end of time, available here on YouTube as well as here on the podcast on Spotify, Apple, iTunes, and Google, and wherever else you can get podcasts. And now a very special thank you, big thank you, the biggest thank you I can possibly give to all of you who support on patreon.com/Mrcreepypasta, who help keep the lights on in my house. Patreons such as Jordan Alexander Sanchez, Ken Lando Higuchi, Brianna Van Tine-Janzen, Chompski, TheRedOakShieldVirus, Sindee Barney, G. Weevil 3, Diana Kraus, Stephen VanHuss, Tristain Pelton, Nico, TheGingerBroz, Dante Rowe, Raphael Rodriguez, Lastbladesong, Eliminator 86, Nebsky, SteampunkSinner, Kaleb Dougal, Daniel Poulsen, Sky Harbor, The Homeless Bird 93, Gabrielle Undefined, Barbie Carmen, Liam Newman, Aaron Stormcrow, Dr. Strawberry, Barbara Masio, Thomas Burgett, Azazel Rotten, Let's Get Scared, S-Man, Brandy Hasanori, and King DDD. Thank you guys so much for supporting on Patreon, as well as all of you that are shown in the description down below. And sweet dreams, everyone.